Joining us on the telephone line is the granddaughter of Babe Ruth, the Bambina. We welcome in Mrs. Linda Ruth Tassetti. Linda, thank you so much for being with Brian Cataquet on KMET Radio.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. It's nice to talk to you.
Well, I want to begin, Linda. This is a historic conversation. If you can explain to our audience how you are a direct descendant of Babe Ruth.
Well, my mother was Dorothy Ruth Perone. If you look at pictures of him holding a little girl and kissing her, that's my mother, Dorothy. And he wasn't married to my grandmother, but she didn't want to raise me. And my grandfather said, "Oh, I love her, I want her." And Helen, his wife, then said, "I want her," because she had had miscarriages. So that's how I'm related, to Juanita Jennings and Babe Ruth.
Now, how was it growing up with the Ruth name? To many, the Ruth name is considered the most famous name in American history. How was it growing up with that iconic name?
Well, actually, until I was kind of able to take care of myself a little bit in 8th grade, I didn't know who my grandfather was. My mother kept it quite a secret. I'm the youngest of 6 children. And we didn't have baseball in our life. We didn't have baseball on the transistor radios, on the TV. And she lived in a small house in Wallingford, Connecticut. And we were just the average, family. So I didn't know until 8th grade when a classmate told me who my grandfather was.
Wow.
And I go home and I said, "Mom, you didn't tell me I was famous." And she said, "'Cause you're not." And thus my education started about my grandfather.
Oh, we're talking to Linda Ruth Tassetti. Linda, if you could talk about some of the stories that you were told about Babe Ruth and his demeanor. Was he a kind, gentle man?
You know what? He very much was. When they portray him, they have him coming in this room like, "Hey, I'm here." Babe didn't have to do that. He merely had to walk into a room and he filled it, and everybody else yelled, "Hey, Babe's here." He definitely was, he could have fun and party, but he was basically a gentle, quiet guy. He, especially with children, he had a great rapport with them, and I think because he understood them. And, they don't like you bounding in like that and saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm here." So, yeah, he was a very gentle man. My mother told me that.
Now, getting back, do you remember stories in the family, your granddad signing autographs for all those kids?
Well, you know what? When he lived on the farm, my mother told me a story where he used to do boxes and boxes and boxes of balls. And her job was to make sure the ink was dry and rewrap them and put them in the boxes. And then he used to sign bats, and he'd do it all winter, and he'd collect them. And, of course, by mid-season, they were gone. But he used to try and prepare. But sometimes when he'd go in, there'd be 1,000 balls sitting on the bed of his hotel.
Oh, wow.
And, he couldn't sign all of them in the time. So he would accrue if there was a friend reporter of his, he'd say, "Grab some of these balls. I'm going to be late." So sometimes he could prepare, and when he was at the stadium, at the clubhouse, he always signed. It was part of his regimen,
Yep. Are you surprised of the value generated from all the merchandise sold of your grandfather?
No, I'm not. I know that sounds kind of pompous, but it's knowing the man. I've been studying him since 8th grade, since I found out, and I'm still studying him. And I'm 64, Brian, and I'm still studying him. And the kind of man he was, no, he's broken all bounds. He's transcended baseball. He's not generational. He's iconic.
Absolutely.
So, no, I'm not shocked.
I mean, some of his earliest baseball cards have sold for over $500,000, Linda. That's incredible.
Yeah, I understand more than Hannes Wagner. If you can find it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, you know what? He was a sensation out the gate. You know, you call these phenoms. He was right out the gate. You know, when in St. Mary's, his field was like 440, 355 power alleys. So he was hitting, 500 home run, 500-foot home run was nothing for him. You know, in fact, they had to switch the trade building around to flip the field at St. Mary's Industrial School because he was breaking the windows in the trade building. So right out the gate, when he went to, the Providence Grays and for a very short time for the Orioles, he was breaking all kinds of records even then.
Yep.
He was just...
Now, I'm sorry.
I'm here, and here we go,
Yeah. Now, you also were involved in retiring the number 3 throughout Major League Baseball, his number. What exactly was the process? Did you have any difficulties getting that task approved with Major League Baseball?
Well, when I wrote to Selig when he was commissioner, he wrote me back a letter, and I still have it, that the reason Jackie Robinson was done was because of a sociological importance and a myriad of reasons. Now, I didn't ask him why. I don't argue that Jackie Robinson has his number retired. I think it's proper. But I don't think he should be the only one. And I've got articles on my site that says, it's www.thetruebaberuth.com, where when they tried to do Clemente, the Robinson family came out and said, no, we want Jackie to be the only one. Well, no.
Oh, is that right?
That's not correct. My grandfather was never exclusive. He was always inclusive. I'm going on a ride. Come on, everybody, come with me. And the funny thing is I don't want to retire it completely. I want to leave 3 on the field because you only think of one person when you see 3 on the back of a jersey. And I don't think he needs a game every year with people wearing number 3. These ball players love their numbers.
Right.
And I would never ask them to wear somebody else's number on their back, ever. I personally think it's rude. So they wouldn't even have to do that game like they do for Robinson. Just have a circle hanging in each stadium or park, or field, with that number 3. That's all I'd really like because he saved baseball. I mean, he literally saved baseball twice. He saved baseball from gambling.
He did, especially during the Great Depression, Linda.
Right, and during the Great Depression, believe it or not, he gave people hope. I mean, I'm not just kidding like it's a saying you say. He literally brought them hope. They were down and out. They had nothing to look forward to, but boy, when they went to that game and he was doing his showmanship, they forgot their problems. They literally forgot their problems. And he also, like I said, saved it from gambling. Twice, 1926 and 1919.
Absolutely. And it brings me to my next question, Linda. Was Babe Ruth a private person in reality, or was he as outgoing as he appears in those black and white footages that we now see?
Yeah, he was outgoing, definitely. The funny thing is he'd be making an appearance, and if you went over to him and said, hey, I got a great fishing hole, or hey, I got a camp, great hunting, he'd say, okay, I'm there, He was just he really acted like an average man. Sometimes he wasn't treated like an average man, but he himself felt he was no better than somebody else. He was just lucky to be able to do something he loved and make people clap. And the more you clapped and yelled, the better he played. Kind of looking for that approval,
Absolutely.
And so he just wanted to make the fans happy. And that's the simple, they get into all these deep and depth, physiological and things of why he's doing this. He just made people happy. He knew he could do it.
We're talking to Linda Ruth Tassetti, granddaughter of Babe Ruth. Linda, who were some of your grandfather's closest friends? Did he have many friends in the game that you know of?
Yeah, Hoyt was his friend, very much his friend. And then you had, the gang like Tony Lazzari, and then there was, And him and Lou were friends. They were just polar opposites. That's all. You know,
Lou
he was in
Gehrig.
bed, Lou was in bed by 10, and Babe he was ADHD, so he was out. You know, you couldn't lock him in a room for a curfew. You know, he just could. My brother was. It's in the family. My brother was ADHD, and he just, you know, so he had a lot of friends. And Lefty Gomez, towards the end of his career, was a friend of his, and so he had a lot of friends. He considered his teammates his buddies, and he always had their back. You know what I mean? That was the thought then. You always have your teammates' back. And he always did what was good for the team, too. You know, whatever it was, he did it.
Now here's a question, Linda. Do you recall stories in the family of the Babe ever saying that he wanted to prove to the world that he was the greatest player of all time? Did he want to be considered the best of all time, or that didn't come up in family conversations, if you recall?
No, my mother talked about that. It's not that he loved it so much. As a kid, when they put the bat and the ball in his hand, and when he pitched, he says, "I'm at home on the mountain on the mound." Because it's easy to get sluggers out. I think he just adored the game so much that he excelled because he had that bat and ball in his hand. You know, you figure from the age of 6, and then he did it as a career, you know, so he could do anything he wanted with that bat and ball. And even when he went to dinner at someone's home, and if there was a Sandlot game going on, he'd say, "Hey, excuse me, do you mind after dinner if I just go for a little while and watch the kids?" That's how much he loved the game. You know, so I think the achievements he made was out of his love for the sport. You know, and I don't think it was hard for him to do it. That's the funny thing. I think baseball came very easy to him.
Very natural. Yeah,
and I think he had, believe it or not, it's in the family too, he had an intuition. When he pointed, he knew he was going to, and wait until the end on a full count in 1932 with with the famous called shot.
Yep.
I think he knew he could do it, and so he did it. And you know what, another thing, he had a philosophy. If I didn't do it now, I'll do it the next time. That's what he tried to instill in kids. If you don't get that home run, it'll come. You just got to be patient. And again, he did that called shot many, many, many times. He did it in Japan. He would go in and say, "Hey, where did Joe Schmo hit his home run?" And they'd say, "Well, he hit it to the right, babe." He said, "Well, mine's going to go left to the scoreboard." So, you know, he just knew what he could do.
Well, he was
very
also
confident.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm sorry to step over you. He's very confident.
Yeah, he was also like a showman. I mean, he was more popular than the President of the United States.
Oh, yeah, well, he had a better year. You heard that.
Yeah, I heard that.
He just, I don't know. He said he was at home on the field. You know, he could, if he, like I said, he had a troubled childhood. His second wife wasn't great, and she used to pick on my mother, and, you know, it wasn't a good family life atmosphere. But when he got on that field, everything was forgotten. That's why he said, if I didn't have baseball, I'd either be in a cemetery or a penitentiary.
Wow.
That's what he said, if he didn't have baseball.
Now,
so
do you think it was difficult for your mom being married to the most famous man in the country at one point in time?
Well, not to Babe, because when he had it, well, he was gone a lot. Don't forget, it took 3 days to go to California on train, you know, playing town games to keep them tuned up all the way. You know, so he was gone for long periods of time. And then, you know, the guy went out and earned money, you know, and the wives took care of the home life. And the first wife, she was like a little princess. She was a little, you know, she was the princess. She'd get off her chair in the stadium like New York, and she'd say, "I'm going to go see my daddy," and just go down and walk into the dugout. You know, she had full run. And then when he married the second wife, she was no longer allowed to hug him, but she did anyway. But, you know, she couldn't greet him at the door and jump in his arms, which he used to love. You know, that big raccoon coat everybody sees him wear?
Yeah.
That he wears? Well, he used to drop that on my mother and laugh like hell because she was so small it just enveloped her. Things like that. So she grabbed her moments when she could be with him. And she didn't want to complain about what was going on because she wanted it to be a fun time. But Claire used to call him and stuff. And so, it was kind of a rocky marriage, that one was.
Now, Linda, explain to our West Coast audience about the big auction that's taking place in a few weeks at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You're very low. Could you
I'm sorry. If you can explain to our listening audience about the big auction that's coming up.
Oh, yes. It's going to be held on June. Well, the reception's June 14th. I think it's the 12th, 13th, and 14th. I think the 15th too. Listen to me, I'm going to it, and I don't even know all the figures about it. But what it is there's third parties in there too. Like the jersey does not belong to me that they have there. It's not, I didn't have a jersey, and the notch bat. There are third parties in there too. But basically, it's a collection that I took care of since I've been a kid. Everybody says, you found out in 8th grade. I said, yeah, but when I was doing the pictures and stuff, my grandfather was just one of many ball players. He didn't stand out. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I knew he was my grandfather, but he was with, Ted and all these players that my grandmother collected. Her husband worked at Yankee Stadium. He was general manager for Stephen Concessions. So he was there with the players. So he had pictures that were autographed, and what happens is I've been taking care of these for years, and it's time. I'm 64. My husband's going to retire. I'm not going to have the house I have now to hold this stuff. So I took 2 years to think about this. I really did, and I said, well, I guess time is right to share it with the fans. Like his hunting gloves. There's a deer head that he shot that's in magnificent condition. I took good care of everything. And, all kinds of personal things. Books that were made out to him. All kinds of things.
Now, we're talking to Linda Ruth Tassetti, granddaughter of Babe Ruth. Linda, did you have many major auction houses in the industry wanting to sell your items? And what made you decide to go with the auction company you picked?
Well, actually, I didn't want to do an auction. I wanted to do it quietly. But you can't keep Babe quiet.
Right.
I found that out.
His spirit lives.
You can't keep him on the down low. So I really, tell you the truth, I really didn't like auctions. I got to tell you, I really didn't like them. And then a friend of mine introduced me to David Hunt. And he had done a lot of the family auctions, like Clementi and Ted Williams. And I heard he was an upstanding guy, one of the few that haven't been indicted. So I said, okay, from the a friend of mine swore up and down that he was honest, he was a good guy. And when I met him, I felt the same thing. After years and years of dealing with people, I've been doing this for over 30 years, I can kind of sum up a person as soon as I see him. You can see him a mile away. And David, I liked his way. And he's a good guy. He wants the best for everybody. And win-win. See, I like win-win situations,
Absolutely. Now, personal question, Linda. You're married to Mr. Tassetti. When you both met, how was your husband's reaction to you being related to George Herman Babe Ruth?
Well, you know what? That's the wonderful thing about my husband, Andy. See, I was an introvert, believe it or not. And when I talk about Babe, then I'm not an introvert. But I'm sitting home watching TV doing my needlework. I'm really kind of a quiet, very quiet person. My husband is very social. So he got me out of that, introvert stuff. But he is on this journey with me. He was with my mom. My mom loved him. She used to use him as an escort when my father couldn't go. And so he's learned all the stories along with me. What I do is if I'm signing, like at a dinner or something, there's a long line. And I talk to each person because the worst thing I want to do is next, like some of these ball players do. I think it's awful. Look at the person. Connect with them. You know, it must be in my DNA. I got to connect with them and say, you know, how are you? The kids, I go, what position do you play? You know, I want to connect at that moment. You're important to me. And so what my husband does is he goes down the line and he's telling stories and keeping these people, you know, from getting really upset. And I always tell him, you know, I'll spend as much time with you too. And so we work as a team, and he's great with keeping the stats. I can't keep numbers in my head, Brian. It's just they won't stay. Names, and I know your name at the moment, but I forget names. So my husband's really good at that, and so he's telling them stats and all that kind of stuff. So we're a team. We really are a team, my husband, Andy, and I.
Oh, that's so cool. Now, talk about some of the projects you've been involved in, Linda, or if you're working on any. You're welcome to mention your website. Go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, well, my website, I think people would, it's great for kids. Teachers love my site for kids doing a book report. I will tell all the kids out there. But it's www, all small letters, truebaberuth.com. And it's more like it's not a static. You're not going to read like paragraphs after paragraphs. It's more like a photo album with paragraphs. And it's got all this, well, I have to add them. I'm behind. I will apologize, everybody, I'm behind. But it has all his 500 and over home runs. They're all grafted. This wonderful guy that helps me out, Bruce Orzer, he has grafted them all out and where the ball landed, which is really fascinating at all the fields. And then I have, oh my God, you know, his Yankee days. His Yankee days I'm behind because he was with them for 12 years. But his Boston days and St. Mary's and all the different facets in his life, I tried to put on. It's like having a small company. This website is big enough for a small company because I knew I was going to have a lot of pictures. So it's just the private man. See, Brian, I know he hit home runs, but from a granddaughter's point of view, I wanted to learn how he felt when he hit the home runs. You see what I mean? I'm coming from a much different perspective than everybody else. I talked to people that actually knew him that are gone now, and I learned intimate things about him. Sometimes too intimate, but intimate things about him. And so that's what I want to know, the private man. You know, so that's what I talk about. When I get up to talk to people, with people, I said, we're going to visit about him. I'm not going to talk at you. We're going to visit about my grandfather. And then I'm going to do Q&A. So any of you that have questions, prepare them, because I do a lot of Q&A. And it's fun. We just have a good time. And people seem to want to know. You know, he's been passed down from generations, from grandfathers to grandsons and dads and moms. Even women know who Babe is.
Oh, that's what I mean. The name's iconic.
He's iconic, and people don't give him credit for being a visionary. That's what they make him dumb, and my grandfather was far from dumb. He thought women should have leagues when he played. How do you like that, Brian?
They're telling me I have 1 minute left,
okay.
Linda. I would love to have you back in the future. I can't thank you enough for being here.
Oh, please, yes, and please, people, come out to the auction. You're going to see really kind of neat things that you've never seen before. That'll be fun to look at. Even if you can't buy it, it's going to be like going to a museum. It really is cool, and it's Yankee Stadium. How can you lose?
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much. We'll speak to you shortly again.
You have my number, Brian, anytime, and thank you for having me on.
And best of luck in the auction.
Oh, thank you. I'm not even thinking of that. I'm trying to deal with parting with the stuff. That's what I'm dealing with.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. That was Linda Ruth Tassetti, granddaughter of George Herman Babe Ruth, on today's program. For those of you looking for an all-star picture for your man cave, visit jamesbennettart.com for an incredible once-in-a-lifetime sale of prints, original oil paintings, or from an award-winning artist that has appeared all over, from Major League Baseball to ESPN to Cooperstown to the NFL and everywhere else. If you can't find your favorite player, James will be happy to create it for you. Visit his site at jamesbennettart.com or click on my landing page for more information. Until next week, happy collecting to all.